Hey everyone, I'm Maya and I'm the PISA President.
Hi, I'm Marie-Pier and I'm the PISA Vice-President. So I just want to start off by saying, I hope you are all safe and you're doing well. With course registration on its way and exam season around the corner, please feel free to reach out to us if you have any question. So I will let it to Maya.
Hey, so this week we were incredibly lucky to speak to Monsieur Marc André Franche about his experiences in the United Nations. So Monsieur Franche spent his professional career working in international development and conflict prevention with the United Nations. He holds a master's degree in politics of development from the London School of Economics and a master's of European studies from Lund University and a BSc in political science from the Université de Montréal. Mr. Franche currently serves as the chief of the UN Secretary General's Peacebuilding Fund, supporting over 40 countries worldwide to prevent violent conflict, relapse into conflict, and reconciliation. The fund is the UN's instrument of first resort, providing timely, catalytic, and risk-tolerant funding to sustain peace. So we hope you enjoy this interview and have a great week. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Good morning.
A pleasure to be with you both.
Thank you. We wanted to start off just with a little bit about yourself and your current position. So we know that you're currently the chief of the UN Secretary General's Peacebuilding Fund. Mm-hmm. Could you speak a little bit about what that job entails?
Absolutely. So about 15 years ago, in 2005, the member states of the United Nations agreed to create what is now called the peace-building architecture. And this architecture created the newest intergovernmental body at the UN called the Peacebuilding Commission, which has 31 members. But it also created an office called the Peacebuilding Support Office and a fund, the Secretary General's Peacebuilding Fund. And the idea originally, in broad terms, was that that the international community was in dire need of a space to deal with countries emerging from violent conflict that might not pose an immediate risk to international security, so that do not need to be on the agenda of the Security Council, but that still needed accompaniment and support from the international community to build peace, to consolidate peace. Now, over the years, that has evolved from mostly a post-conflict outfit to an architecture that is now dealing with both prevention, with building peace during conflict and after. And this also because of the reality that today, given the great transformation in the way conflicts are working, you don't have, as before, a linear approach, where you would have a conflict between two countries, a peace deal, a ceasefire agreement, a peace deal, a peacekeeping mission, and then development. Many times, and this is the reality in most crisis countries today, you see all those things happening at the same time in different areas. And of course, conflicts are no longer really between countries. So all that to say that the Commission and the architecture has tried to adapt over the years and now deals with all those things. And so in the same way, the financial mechanism of this architecture, which is the fund that I lead, has also transformed over the years. And we're a small group, a small team of people. We're about 10, 15 people if you calculate people that are seconded and on loan. And what we do is that we help UN teams in these countries, but also increasingly civil society, develop ideas that we can support, that we can put funding to, that will either prevent violent conflict, that will reduce the intensity of conflict during conflict, but also consolidate, build peace in post-conflict situations. So we basically are like the investment bankers of peace. We will invest funding in any good ideas. And the good thing I would say about this fund is, I would say its particularities is that we try to be timely, meaning that we try to act very quickly. We try to be what we say is the funders of first resort. So the ones who get things started. So we like to see that we're catalytic, that we get processes to start. We invest in processes and ideas that also maybe might be too risky for others. So we like to say we're risk tolerant. So that's a bit what the fund does. And so I lead that team of people that both, helps countries develop their proposals, that helps my boss take decisions on this funding, and then we help monitor the impact, and we gather lessons learned, and we help the entire UN family at doing so.
To keep going on that line, we were wondering, could you speak a little bit about your journey? How did you get where you are today? Because obviously you're holding a position that is very prestigious. So how did you get there?
Well, everything starts in political science. So no, I mean, as I mentioned over the conversation that I had with you and your colleagues a few weeks ago, I went through, I studied political science as an undergrad, then went abroad and did a few master's degrees in international development. And then I became a volunteer. So I volunteered for the first year or so at the UN in Bolivia, where I worked on environmental programs. And so in great part, I owe this to back then a Government of Canada program that was encouraging young graduates to go and volunteer around the world. And that's what gave me my first chance, if you was my first job. And as part of that, I started, I would say, taking on more responsibilities, and also, I would say, being quite open in accepting all sorts of different types of work. And that was great because I was able, back in Bolivia, working on different fronts, and that opened up a bit my perspective about what the UN was doing, what I could contribute to it. And that led after that to another, actually, Government of Canada sponsored program that was called the Junior Professional Officer. And so I served as a junior professional officer in Colombia for 2 years. And that was my gateway into this career and into the UN. So I guess that's in a few steps how I got there.
I did want to know what first drew you to working with the UN, because it's often, I think, a stereotype of political science and international studies students that the UN is kind of the end goal for a lot of us, I think. So what was it that really drew you to working there?
Well, I mean, I guess things evolve as you understand the machine better, and as you learn over the years. But if I put myself back at when I was your age, and I was studying the United Nations, I guess the most important thing, and I think this is what you will think of as well when you think of the UN. I think you think of the promise of the UN, the charter, and the principles that underpin the UN. And I think what anybody, I guess, who is studying international relations can appreciate the marvel that the UN is. And I'm not sure that if we tried to develop it, if we tried to create it today in the present circumstances, we would be able to. So I think this is what drew me. It kind of embodied everything that I thought was important about the world. These principles of solidarity, the principles that cooperation and collaboration, we can confront our biggest challenges. I was also quite excited about this concept of people from different backgrounds and nations coming together and solving big issues and big problems. And I was very attracted by that. And so I think that's what drew me originally. And it was also by chance, simply that, you know, in part the first intern, you know, the first volunteer or internship that I got was with the UN. But I think that's what drew me. But I don't think that when I was your age or when I was at university, I necessarily thought I want to work for the UN. You know, I knew that I was very clear, and since I was very young, that I wanted to work in international development. My father, I grew up in this environment as well. My father still does work in international development. So I was always clear to, it was always clear to me that I would work in this field, that I would work internationally, that I wanted to work at helping others, that I wanted to help at making this world, this planet a better place, but not necessarily through the UN. And I do think that there are, especially today, much more than when I was your age, I think today there is a much broader set of avenues and opportunities to do this beyond the UN.
Speaking of that, in your last presentation that you did, you mentioned your work in Bolivia. Can you tell us more about your work there?
Mm-hmm. Well, when I started, I must say the work over there was it was a bit foreign to me. Meaning, I was assigned in the team that worked on environmental programs. So I was part of the environment team of the UN development program in Bolivia. And I must say I knew nothing about it. And so it was a bit of a panic for certainly the first months because I had to really learn quite a bit. And I do remember I had a lot of energy back then, but I do remember spending a number of nights actually in the office many times a week. Because I had so much to learn that I would have to catch up on reading, and my Spanish was very bad, so everything took double the time to read. So I must say that I had to do a lot of work to learn, but also I was put into positions that was quite interesting in a sense that I got to be part of a team that facilitated an agreement between countries on the management of dry areas. I was also put to do things that are very, you might think, menial, yeah, in a sense that I remember I didn't have enough money to go back home for Christmas. So I was the only one in the office left over the holidays. So I spent most of my holidays writing up contracts for the first ever national park system, and I wrote the contracts of every single park ranger. So it was very, very good because I got to know each one of them, and I visited many of those parks after, and it was great because, you know, I had been the one writing their contracts. So, you know, I did a lot of different things, and I think this is the interesting part about these kind of jobs when you start, is that it's really not necessarily about the what, it's really the kind of exposure you get. And I think getting the widest possible exposure is the most important.
This is kind of jumping off on your answer to why you wanted to work in the UN, but you know, often as students we hear stories about people who have become jaded about the work that they've been doing, or they've become or they've burned out after several years of working in their field, not necessarily in the UN, but in any career. And I was just wondering, you know, how does one stop themselves from being pessimistic, especially doing such a hard job that it is that you're doing?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I have my days of and hours of frustration, I guess, like anybody else, and I think this is a part of the work, and it's actually part of any work. So now, perhaps two things I could say to that. I guess the first one is that I remain quite optimistic about the future of the UN, although I am, as many, very worried about its future, especially in this world where we're seeing right now an increase of nationalism, of authoritarian tendencies, of inward-looking leadership, I would say. And so in this context, it is obviously very, very strange, perhaps, to be optimistic about the future of the UN. But I think this is extremely serious, and it is a reckoning moment for the international system where we need to double up on demonstrating the value of multilateral approaches. We need to also confront this wave of disinformation with facts and with science, and but let's say looking at the long view, looking at many decades forward, and I do think that the problems that we are facing today are going to be increasingly complex. We're going to face problems that no one person, no one entity, no one government will be able to face on its own. And of course, there's climate change, but there's the challenge of inequality and poverty, and all the challenges that we are confronting today. They're increasingly going to be dependent on us cooperating, and we are going to be increasingly interconnected and interdependent. And so, yes, you might criticize the UN for not doing enough, not being ineffective. You might criticize multilateral institutions for failing in this and that, but we still need them. And I think that the only solution to that is to strengthen them. And I think that the way, that there are conversations, not all of them are very encouraging, on reforms of both of the UN, but across the multilateral institutions. I don't think there is any choice. And when I speak to people of your generation, I feel that there's a natural understanding of this interconnectedness because you're born with it. And I think this is encouraging for the future of institutions of the UN. Yeah.
So we have one final question. What would be your biggest piece of advice for students looking to make a difference in the world?
So I've mentioned a few, when I was with you in class, but I think the most important thing, especially for students and young people who are trying or wanting, like you, to engage in international affairs, in international development, my first recommendation is to get out there. Leave as quickly as you can, and go to the most difficult, most challenging places around the world. And I think this is very, very important. You will not, I think you go to university to learn how to think, to organize your thoughts, but it's very difficult to learn about the world in university. And so I think that's the most important thing, is to go out there. Go and work in a refugee camp, go and work with organizations that are providing aid, go and work in organizations that are facilitating processes between young people. And, it doesn't really matter, I think, when you are starting, in what field or in what type of country. I think just getting out there and exposing yourself to challenging situation is the way to learn.
Thank you so much for that advice, and we know you're very busy, so thank you for giving us the time this morning, and for sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your advice with us and with the rest of the students here at Bishop's. So thank you very much. It was very much appreciated.
Really nice to see you both, and thanks for inviting me to do this. It's a real pleasure.